When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. I still remember the sound of the bus wheels grinding against the cracked road as it carried me further and further north. The windows rattled with each bump, and beyond the glass stretched endless rice fields, swallowed by mist. It was a familiar sight, one I hadn't seen in more than a decade, and yet that night it felt alien, as if the landscape itself was holding its breath, waiting for me. I had left this village when I was 17. My mother had insisted that I study in Bangkok, far from the shadows that clung to the place where I was born. I listened, but not because I believed her stories of curses and spirits. I thought she was only being superstitious, like all the elders who whispered prayers before empty shrines. I obeyed because I wanted to escape, but now 11 years later, I was returning. My mother was gone. They told me she had died suddenly, her body found slumped against the wooden threshold of our old home. No signs of illness, no struggle, just silence. The neighbors said her eyes were still open, staring at the altar in the corner. They said it looked as though she had been speaking to someone when death claimed her. I did not believe the stories. At least that was what I told myself when I packed my bag in Bangkok. But as the bus groaned along the mountain road and the air grew colder, the weight of those words pressed down on me. Somewhere behind me, a baby cried. Or maybe it wasn't a baby. The sound was faint, thin, like the squeak of an old hinge, but it rose and fell with the rhythm of a child's sobs. The other passengers didn't seem to notice. The driver muttered something under his breath, a prayer perhaps, his hands gripping the wheel a little too tightly. I turned to the window, forcing myself to look at the darkness outside. Shapes moved among the trees. Just shadows, I thought. Just tricks of the headlights. But every time I blinked, I caught the impression of small figures standing by the roadside, watching as we passed. Children barefoot, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. I pressed my palm to the cold glass. Nothing. Only the reflection of my own face, pale beneath the dim light. The bus jolted to a stop at the edge of the village. The driver didn't announce it. He simply cut the engine and nodded toward the door. I was the only one to step off. The air here was heavier, filled with the smell of damp earth and burnt incense. The village hadn't changed. Wooden houses leaned on stilts, their walls patched with bamboo. Lanterns swayed weakly in the wind, their glow smothered by the mist. But there was something I had forgotten, something that made my chest tighten. At every doorway, by every gate, stood a doll. Kumanthong. Small wooden or clay figures, dressed in scraps of silk, their faces painted with crude smiles. Some were as tall as a child of 5, others no larger than a fist. Each one had eyes, round, black, and glistening, as though wet. They stared outward, guarding the homes of their keepers, or perhaps watching the villagers themselves. I had grown up with them, though I never paid much attention before. My mother kept one in the corner of our house. She called him her little son, though she had me. She spoke to it when she thought I wasn't listening. She left food for it, bowls of rice, bits of fruit, even drops of her own blood pricked from her finger on certain nights. Back then, I thought it was nothing more than old superstition, a tradition clung to by people too poor to let go of their fears. But standing there now, surrounded by hundreds of unblinking eyes, I felt something stir in the pit of my stomach. I walked through the village, my footsteps muffled by the damp ground. Few houses had their lights on. Curtains twitched as I passed, but no one came out. It was as though the village itself had learned to hide. At last I reached my mother's house. The wooden walls leaned the same way. The roof tiles sagged under the weight of years. But the doorway had been freshly swept, the altar inside still burning incense. Someone had been caring for this place after her death. I stepped inside. The air was thick with smoke, bitter and cloying. The altar was crowded with offerings, fruit, flowers, candles. And at the center, a doll sat, dressed in a faded red cloth. Its smile was faint, almost smudged, but those eyes gleamed in the wavering light. I froze. That wasn't the doll I remembered. My mother's Kumanthong had worn yellow, not red. She had always kept it on the floor, never on the altar. And yet here it was, elevated, honored, watching me. I reached out, hesitant, my fingers trembling. The moment my skin brushed the edge of its robe, a sound echoed through the house. Tap, the sharp strike of wood against wood. I turned. The hallway was empty, yet the sound came again, closer this time. Tap, 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 like the rhythm of wooden clogs on the floor. I whispered my mother's name before I realized what I was doing. The silence that followed was heavier than any answer. I forced myself to walk down the hallway. The air grew colder with each step, the shadows longer, darker. At the end of the hall was her room, the place where she had died. The door was ajar, just enough for me to see inside. Her bed was neatly made, the blanket folded. A bowl of rice sat on the table, untouched, though the grains had not yet molded. Someone had placed it there recently, and on the floor just beyond the threshold lay a single wooden clog. I bent down, picking it up slowly. It was small, the kind worn by women. My mother's? Perhaps. But as I turned it over in my hands, I noticed something strange. The wood was wet, slick, as though someone had just walked through rain. Yet the floor was dry, my chest tightened. I placed the clog back where I had found it, afraid to disturb it further. As I straightened, I felt it, that prickling sensation along my neck, the weight of eyes fixed on me. I spun around. Nothing. Only the dim corridor stretching back toward the altar, where the red-robed doll still sat. Its smile seemed wider now, though I knew it was only the flicker of the candlelight. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was no longer watching the door. It was watching me. I tried to sleep that first night, though the air inside the house seemed unwilling to let me rest. The mattress creaked under my weight. The walls groaned with each shift of the wind. It was the same bed I had once shared with my mother during storms, yet now it felt alien, colder than stone. I lay on my side staring at the ceiling beams. Shadows wavered across the wood, stretching into shapes that looked like arms reaching downward. My eyelids grew heavy, but each time I was about to drift off, I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of wooden clogs moving across the floorboards. I sat up, heart hammering. "Mother?" My voice was barely more than a whisper. No answer. Only the faint hiss of incense still burning at the altar. I pulled the blanket around my shoulders and stood, letting my bare feet touch the cool wood. The house was silent, yet it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of being watched. I moved toward the altar again. The doll in red sat unmoved, its tiny painted mouth curved in that same soft smile. But the candle beside it had nearly burned out, and in the dimming light, the shadows across its face seemed to shift. For a moment I swore its lips parted, as if it were trying to speak. I stepped closer. My pulse quickened. "Did you take her?" I don't know why I said it. Perhaps grief made me desperate. Perhaps some part of me wanted to believe the whispers, the stories that my mother's death wasn't meaningless. The candle sputtered out. Darkness swallowed the room, heavy and absolute. And in that darkness, I heard it, clear, sharp, unmistakable, the laughter of a child. It was high-pitched, playful, like the sound of a boy chasing his friends through a field. Yet it echoed too long, as though the walls themselves were laughing. I stumbled back, fumbling for the box of matches my mother always kept near the altar. My finger struck one, the flame flaring to life. The doll was still there, unmoving, smiling, watching. But now there was rice scattered across the floor, as though a bowl had been tipped over in the dark. And in the rice were tiny footprints, bare, wet footprints, leading away into the hallway. I barely slept that night. When dawn finally came, I stepped outside in the pale gray light. The village was already stirring, though it did not feel alive. Women carried baskets to the well but did not speak to one another. Men sat in doorways smoking, their eyes lowered. Children played in silence, their laughter absent, their movements oddly slow, and everywhere the dolls. They were not just at the doorways. I saw them propped on fences, sitting on rooftops, hanging from tree branches. Some were new, their paint fresh and bright. Others were old, their silk clothing faded, their faces cracked, yet still carefully dusted, as if someone had tended to them even as they fell apart. I walked to the market square, hoping for normality. I remembered this place bustling with noise when I was young, the smell of grilled fish, the chatter of vendors. But now those stalls stood open, the air was hushed. The only sound was the faint clatter of a woman arranging her goods. Rows upon rows of small dolls, each one carved differently, each one staring. "Kumanthong," she whispered when she saw me looking. "They protect you if you keep them happy." Her eyes were hollow, the whites tinged yellow with age or sickness. She pressed one into my hand before I could protest. "This one is lonely," she said. "He wants a home." The wood felt warm, almost pulsing. I set it back on the table quickly, muttering an excuse. Her smile did not falter, though her gaze seemed to follow me even as I walked away. That evening I found myself wandering to the old well at the edge of the village. My mother used to warn me never to linger there. She said voices rose from its depths at night, voices that could pull you down if you listened too long. Now, standing before it, I understood. The well was deep, darker than any I had seen, its mouth lined with moss and offerings, wilted flowers, coins, even strands of hair tied with red string. I leaned closer. The air above it was cooler, damp against my skin. And then I heard it, a whisper. Not words, not at first, just the rhythm of breath, the rise and fall of something alive. Then faintly, a phrase carried upward like smoke. "Come back to us." I staggered back, nearly tripping. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. But when I looked around, no one was there. Only the well, silent once more, its surface reflecting the gray of the evening sky. That night the dream came. I was a child again, sitting cross-legged before the altar. My mother knelt beside me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. The doll in yellow, the one I remembered, sat in front of us. "Say thank you," she whispered to me. "He is listening." In the dream I obeyed. My small voice echoed in the dark room. "Thank you." The doll smiled wider, too wide. My mother's face blurred, her lips moving, though I couldn't hear her words. Then she turned to me, her eyes suddenly hollow. "You left him hungry," she said. "He remembers." I woke with a gasp. The taste of incense thick in my mouth. The house was silent again, but the air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. And when I glanced toward the altar, my blood ran cold. The doll was no longer wearing red. It was wearing yellow. The sun rose pale and thin, but it did nothing to lift the chill inside me. My mother's death, the whispers, the dolls, it all circled in my mind, a spiral I couldn't escape. And yet, beneath the fear, there was something else, a need. I had come here searching for answers. Now it seemed the answers were searching for me. Morning came gray and heavy, though the sun had already climbed above the mountains. The light here felt weaker, as if the mist drank it before it could reach the ground. I stepped outside, hoping for the comfort of warmth, but instead I found myself shivering in air that clung damply to my skin. The village stirred slowly, but not as I remembered. When I was a child, mornings had been full of noise. Roosters crowing, women calling to one another from their porches, children chasing stray dogs down the dirt paths. Now sounds seemed muted. People moved about their chores in silence, their eyes lowered, their lips pressed tight as though afraid that speaking would summon something listening nearby. Every doorway I passed bore its sentinel, a Kumanthong. In the daylight, I thought they might appear less menacing. After all, they were only dolls, wooden, clay, or plaster, dressed in scraps of colored cloth. But the sun did not soften them. If anything, their presence was more unsettling. Each one was carefully positioned, their painted eyes aimed toward the road, toward me. As I walked, I began to notice something I hadn't before. Their faces were not all the same. Some wore crooked smiles, others neutral expressions. But a few bore mouths that seemed twisted in pain. Their tiny lips curved downward, their eyes wide, pleading. I wondered why anyone would keep such a doll. Then again, perhaps the expressions had changed with time. I reached the well at the center of the village, the one everyone used for water. Women bent over it with buckets, their movements mechanical. None of them spoke, but each one, before lowering her rope, paused to touch the doll tied to the post beside the well. Its silk clothes were stained and faded, its body cracked with age, but the gesture was done with reverence like a prayer. One woman glanced at me. Her eyes flicked to the side, to the doll I was staring at, then back to me. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, a warning. I turned away unsettled. Later that day, I went to my mother's altar again. The doll in yellow still sat there, its black eyes glistening faintly in the dim light. I could almost believe someone had polished them overnight. The incense had burned down to ash, but the scent still lingered, sweet and choking. I whispered to myself as if speaking aloud might give me courage. It wasn't like this before. It wasn't this quiet. From the corner of my eye, I thought I saw the doll tilt its head. An old man came by in the afternoon. His back was bent, his face lined deep as the cracks in dried earth. He carried a small basket of herbs, which he set on my porch without asking. "You are her son," he said. His voice was low, almost a growl. "Yes, she was a stubborn woman." He paused, his gaze sliding toward the house. "She tried to change things. That is why she is gone." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the words caught in my throat. His eyes were sharp, too sharp for someone so frail. Instead, I asked, "Why is the village so quiet?" The man chuckled without humor. "When one speaks too loudly, the little ones hear. And when the little ones hear, they want." "The little ones?" He pointed at the doll on my mother's altar. His hands shook, but his meaning was clear. "They are always listening, always hungry. Do not feed them too much. Do not feed them too little. Find the balance, or—" He did not finish. He picked up his basket and shuffled away. I watched him go until he was swallowed by the mist. That night, the silence grew unbearable. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was the presence of something deeper, a silence that seemed alive. I could hear my own heartbeat, the rasp of my breath, the creak of the wooden beams above me. But beneath those, faint and steady, was another rhythm, the patter of small feet on the floor. I froze in bed. The sound circled the room, quick and light, like a child running in playful loops. I sat up, but the moment I did, the footsteps stopped. The house held its breath. Slowly, I turned my head toward the altar. The doll was gone. My chest tightened. I rubbed my eyes, convinced I was imagining it. But no, the altar was empty. The yellow cloth lay folded neatly where it had been, but the doll itself had vanished. Something shifted in the shadows near the doorway. My skin prickled. "Mother?" I whispered, though I knew it wasn't her. The shadows moved, and for the briefest moment, I saw her. She stood there, framed by the doorway, her long hair falling over her face. She wore the white blouse I remembered, the one with embroidered cuffs. She did not move, did not breathe. "Mother!" The word broke from my lips, fragile as glass. Then a gust of wind swept through the house, extinguishing the candles. Darkness swallowed her. When I relit the candle, the doorway was empty, but the doll was back on the altar, sitting upright, smiling as though it had never left. The next morning, I visited my mother's neighbor, a woman named Molly, who had known her for decades. She welcomed me with a nod, but little else, her hands busy weaving baskets of bamboo. I asked about my mother, about her final days. "She was restless," Molly said after a pause. "She stopped feeding him." "Feeding who?" Molly's eyes flicked to the corner of her room. There, of course, sat another Kumanthong, this one with a cracked clay head and missing fingers. "You know who." She believed it was wrong. She said the children should be freed. But no one listens to such things here, not anymore. I thought of the altar, of the doll's smile, of the footprints in rice. "Do you believe it?" I asked. Molly looked at me, her gaze hard and unblinking. "Belief has nothing to do with it. They are here, whether you bow to them or not." Her words lingered with me all day, echoing in my mind as I wandered the silent paths. Everywhere I looked, the dolls stared back. Some grinned, some frowned, but all of them seemed aware. And I began to wonder if the silence of the village wasn't silence at all. Perhaps it was listening. That night I woke to the sound of weeping. It was faint at first, like a muffled sob drifting through the walls. I sat up, straining to hear. The weeping grew clearer, the sound of a woman crying just outside my window. I rose, pushed the curtain aside. There was nothing there, only the mist curling through the trees. But on the windowsill lay something that hadn't been there before, a single wooden clog, small, worn smooth by years of use. The same clog I had found outside my mother's room, and this time it was wet with fresh rain. I did not sleep after that. I sat before the altar staring at the doll, daring it to move. Its smile never changed, but its eyes. In the shifting glow of the candlelight, I could have sworn I saw them glisten, as if filled with tears. Somewhere beyond the walls, a rooster crowed. Dawn was coming, but the sound carried no relief. Because I realized then that my mother's death was not the end of something. It was the beginning. I had always tried to forget the memories of my childhood in this village, but they returned to me with startling clarity the longer I stayed. Memories I had pushed down, convinced they were only dreams, now rose like bones through the surface of soil. I remembered the yellow-robed doll that had sat in our home for as long as I could recall. My mother spoke to it every night, whispering words I could never fully catch. Sometimes she would prick her finger and let a drop of blood fall into a bowl before it, her face solemn, her lips moving in prayer. As a boy, I thought it was strange, but not frightening. Many children in the village grew up with the same. Some even spoke of their dolls as though they were real siblings. I once visited a friend's house and watched as he placed half his dinner into a tiny bowl beside his family's doll. When I asked him why, he said, "He eats when I eat. If I don't share, he'll be angry." I laughed then, but that night my friend did not come to school the next day. His mother said he had a fever. By the time he returned a week later, his eyes were hollow, and he refused to speak of the doll again. Now walking through the market square once more, I noticed that the stalls had changed. Alongside rice and fish, there were stands selling miniature clothes, toy jewelry, even small bowls carved from coconut shells. Offerings, objects not meant for the living, but for the dolls. One vendor, her face hidden behind a wide straw hat, beckoned me closer. She laid out a silk robe no larger than my hand, dyed deep crimson. "For your little one," she murmured. "I don't have one," I said. Her head tilted. From beneath the brim of her hat, I caught the glint of her eyes. Black, sharp, unblinking. "You do," she whispered. "He is waiting." Before I could reply, a child ran past me, clutching a clay doll to his chest. The vendor turned her attention away, humming a tune that sounded like a lullaby sung through broken teeth. I left quickly, the sound of her humming clinging to me like smoke. That evening, I searched my mother's room for answers. In a small chest beneath her bed, I found a bundle of old notebooks. The pages were brittle, stained with ink and something darker. Her handwriting curled across them in tight lines, notes mixed with prayers. One entry caught my eye. "He asked for more. Rice is not enough. Fruit is not enough. He wants warmth. He wants what is mine." I stared at the words until the ink seemed to shift on the page. My throat tightened. I turned to another entry, written days later. "I woke with scratches on my arms. They are small like a child's nails." He was not satisfied. The pages blurred before me. My mother had been fighting something, resisting it, and in the end, it had claimed her. I slammed the notebook shut, my hands trembling. The sound echoed too loudly in the silent room. And then, from the corner, I heard it. A giggle, high-pitched, fleeting, like a child amused by a secret. I turned. The doll on the altar sat still, its yellow robe draped neatly around it. But its eyes, I could have sworn they were brighter, sharper, as if mocking me. That night the sounds grew worse. At first it was only the patter of small feet circling the room. Then came the scratching, faint at first, then louder, nails dragging along the walls, across the wooden beams, beneath my bed. I pressed my hands over my ears, but the sound slipped through, thin and sharp. Finally I shouted, "What do you want?" The house fell silent. For a long moment, nothing stirred. Then slowly from the altar, the bowl of rice tipped over. Grains spilled across the floor in a soft cascade. And there in the scattered rice appeared fresh footprints. Tiny, wet, glistening in the candlelight. They led not to the door, but to me. Sleep was impossible. By dawn I stumbled outside, desperate for air. The mist hung heavier than before, curling around the houses like smoke from an unseen fire. As I walked through the paths, I saw other houses with bowls placed before their doors. Some contained rice, others meat, others darker offerings. I paused before one house where a bowl sat filled not with food, but with something red. Blood, thick and congealed. A young woman emerged, cradling a doll in her arms like a baby. She looked at me with hollow eyes, her lips trembling in a smile too wide. "He was hungry last night," she said softly. "He asked for more." I turned away quickly, bile rising in my throat. That evening, I wandered to the edge of the village, to the small shrine hidden beneath the banyan tree. I remembered playing there as a child, though my mother always scolded me afterward. Now the shrine was covered in offerings, bowls of rice, strings of marigolds, tiny pairs of shoes. As I stood before it, I heard whispers in the air, soft as wind but carrying words nonetheless. "We are still here. We are still hungry." The ground beneath me felt soft, damp, as though something moved just below the surface. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a doll that someone had left at the base of the tree. Its face was smeared with something dark, its eyes dull and empty. But as I watched, a single tear slid down its cheek. That night I dreamed again. I was standing in my mother's room. The The doll sat before me, larger now, nearly the size of a child. Its eyes glowed faintly. Its smile stretched too far. "Feed me," it whispered. The voice was not a child's, but many children's, layered, overlapping, like dozens speaking at once. "I don't have anything," I said. My voice cracked in the dream, weak as a child's. It leaned closer, its wooden face pressing near mine. "You do. You are enough." I woke with a scream, sweat drenching my body. My hands shook as I lit a candle, desperate for light. The flame flickered, casting long shadows across the room. And in those shadows I saw them. Dozens of small figures, crouched along the walls, their eyes gleaming, their mouths whispering in unison. "Hungry, hungry." The candle sputtered. Darkness rushed in. When the light returned, when I dared to open my eyes, there was nothing. Only the altar, the doll in its yellow robe, smiling patiently. But on the floor beside my bed lay a small wooden bowl. Inside it, smeared thick across the bottom, was blood. My blood. Mourning in the village was not like mourning anywhere else. Here the air seemed too still, as if even the birds refused to break the silence. The mist lingered long past dawn, drifting through the narrow paths like shrouds. I stepped outside, clutching the small wound on my arm that had bled during the night. My blood had been taken. I had no proof, yet I knew it. The bowl beside my bed was gone, as though someone or something had carried it away. I told myself I needed answers, not prayers, not whispers, but truth. And in this village, truth could only be found in the mouths of the elders. The oldest was May Chaba, a widow who lived at the far end of the rice fields. I remembered her from childhood, a hunched figure, her teeth stained red from chewing betel, her eyes clouded with age yet sharp enough to pierce lies. Her house smelled of smoke and herbs, dried leaves hanging from the rafters. When she saw me at her doorway, she let out a thin laugh. "The son of Mali returns," she croaked. "I wondered when the dead would call you back." Her words froze me. "You knew my mother?" "Of course, everyone knew her. She was strong, but strength does not outlast hunger." I stepped inside. "Tell me the truth, about the dolls, about what they are." May Chaba leaned forward, her voice dropping to a rasp. "They are not dolls. They are children who never had a chance to live. Spirits bound by ritual. Once, long ago, men would carve the bodies from stillborn infants, paint them with gold, and invite the soul to stay. They called them Kumanthong, golden boys. Protective, they said. Loyal, they said. But a soul forced into a cage does not stay gentle forever." Her words sank into me like knives. "So the villagers still do this?" She spat onto the floor. "Not openly. The laws forbade it long ago. But traditions do not die so easily. Some now craft wooden dolls, clay figures, porcelain faces. But the spirit must still be lured, still be bound. Blood, prayers, promises, it makes no difference. Once invited, the soul will want more." I thought of my mother's journals, her scratches, her exhaustion. "Did she—" May Chaba's eyes narrowed. "Your mother tried to resist. She stopped feeding him. That is why she died." The words hit me harder than any blow. "No," I whispered. "You're lying." But May Chaba only shook her head, her mouth curling in a bitter smile. "Listen carefully, child. The Kumanthong is never satisfied with rice. He will ask for warmth, then blood, then life. If you deny him, he will take it himself. That is his nature. That is the curse of this village." I left her house shaken, my mind tangled with images I wished I could erase. Stillborn infants, gilded in gold. Spirits trapped in silence. My mother whispering at night, offering herself piece by piece until nothing remained. The village looked different now. Every doorway seemed like a shrine, every child's toy a prison. The laughter of children no longer sounded innocent. It carried an edge, like echoes of unseen voices. As I passed a group of boys playing marbles, one of them looked up at me. His face was smeared with dirt, but his eyes were old, far older than any child should be. He smiled, and in that smile I saw teeth too sharp, too deliberate. I stumbled back, my heart pounding. When I blinked, he was only a boy again, giggling as he rolled his marble across the dust. That evening I returned to my mother's chest. I needed more than scraps of her words. Digging deeper, I found an envelope hidden beneath the lining. Inside was a faded photograph. My mother, much younger, standing beside a monk. Between them sat a small golden figure, a doll, but not quite. Its face was too real, too detailed, its eyes seeming to follow me even through the photograph. On the back, written in my mother's hand, were the words, "Blessing or curse, it depends on how long I can endure." I clenched the photo, rage mixing with fear. Why had she kept this secret? Why had she chosen silence until it consumed her? The candle flickered. A breeze slipped through the room, though the windows were shut. I looked up, and the doll on the altar was gone. Panic surged through me. I searched the corners, the shadows, beneath the bed. Nothing. Then I heard it, the sound of wooden feet tapping across the floorboards. Slowly, deliberately, circling me. I turned, but the room was empty. Only the sound moved, closer, closer, until I felt the pressure of a small hand against my ankle. I froze. My breath caught in my chest. When I dared to look down, there was nothing. Only dust, scattered like rice across the floor. Sleep eluded me once more. My mind returned again and again to May Chaba's words. They are children who never had a chance to live. Was that why they clung so desperately? Was their hunger not for food, but for the life denied them? I remembered something my mother once whispered when she thought I was asleep. "I'm sorry, little one. I can't give you what you want." At the time, I thought she was speaking to me. Now I wasn't so sure. The following day, I sought another elder, Fra Somchai, the last monk who still tended the crumbling temple at the edge of the village. The temple was nearly deserted, its walls cracked, its statues draped in dust. The monk greeted me with a slow nod. His skin was withered, his eyes deep pools of sorrow. "You seek answers," he said before I even spoke. "Yes, about the Kumanthong, about my mother," he sighed. "Your mother came here often. She begged me to cleanse the spirit, to free her. But exorcism is not so simple when the bond is made willingly." "Willingly," I repeated. He nodded. "To create a Kumanthong, one must invite it. Your mother invited him. Perhaps she thought it would bring you protection, wealth, fortune. But once the invitation is made, it cannot be revoked. A guest becomes a master." I swallowed hard. "Is there any way to end it?" His eyes lowered. "There is always a way, but it is not one you will want to hear." Before I could press further, the sound of children's laughter echoed from the temple yard. I turned and froze. Dozens of dolls sat lined along the steps, their faces cracked, their painted eyes fixed on me. I was certain they had not been there when I entered. One by one, they seemed to tilt their heads. Not much, only slightly, but enough to make my blood run cold. The monk closed his eyes and began to chant. The air thickened, the shadows stretched. The dolls' mouths opened, not wide, but just enough for the faintest whisper to spill out. "Hungry, hungry." The chant grew louder. My head spun, my vision blurred, and then silence. When I blinked again, the steps were empty. The dolls were gone. The monk's voice trembled. "Leave this place. You are not ready." I staggered back to the village, my mind unraveling. Every truth I uncovered only led to more shadows. My mother's death was no accident, no illness. It was the consequence of a bargain she had struck, a bargain that now seemed to reach for me. That night, I dreamt again of the doll, but this time it was not alone. Dozens of them stood in the darkness, their small faces gleaming with gold, their eyes fixed on me. In unison, they whispered, "We are your family now. Feed us or join us." I woke with a scream, the photograph of my mother clutched in my hand, and in the candlelight I saw them, tiny handprints smeared in dust across the walls, circling my bed like a ritual drawn by unseen fingers. The banyan tree loomed at the edge of the village like a sentinel of forgotten times. Its roots twisted into the earth like the claws of something ancient, and its branches spread wide, blotting out the sky. As a boy, I had always avoided it after dark. Now as a man, I felt the same chill crawling along my skin when I approached. The shrine beneath the tree was older than the village itself, or so May Chaba had once claimed. A low, crumbling structure of stone, with faded carvings of figures bowing in supplication. Offerings lay scattered across the ground, wilted marigolds, cracked bowls, melted candles. And among them, dozens of small dolls, each abandoned, each broken in a different way. The air was heavy with incense, though no smoke rose. It smelled old, as though the very soil exhaled prayers long forgotten. I lit a candle and placed it before the shrine. The flame trembled, bending sharply as if pushed by an unseen breath. That was when I heard it. Whispers. At first they were faint, like wind stirring dry leaves. Then they grew clearer, overlapping voices, high-pitched and soft, as if children were speaking just beyond sight. He took me from her arms. She promised I would live. I'm still hungry. The candle flickered violently. My throat tightened. "Who are you?" I whispered. The voices replied together, layered in a harmony that was anything but human. "We are the ones they called. We are the ones they caged." I pressed my hands against my ears, but the whispers seeped through, echoing in my skull. Visions swam before my eyes, flashes of women crying, monks chanting, tiny bodies wrapped in cloth, painted in gold. The images came too fast, too sharp, as though the tree itself was forcing me to remember something I had never lived. And then, among the visions, I saw her, my mother. She was kneeling before the banyan shrine, her hands trembling as she held a small bundle. She was younger, her face gaunt with fear and exhaustion. She placed the bundle before the shrine, whispering words I could not hear. The bundle shifted. A faint cry rose from it, a child's cry, cut off too soon. I staggered back, my head spinning. "No! No, it can't be!" The voices rose in a chant. "She gave! She gave! Now you must give!" I fell to my knees, clutching the dirt. My mind refused to believe, but the vision lingered, burned into me. Had my mother truly created a Kumanthong? Had she bound a soul to our family, hoping to protect me? "Why me?" I cried out. "Why are you showing me this?" The whispers lowered, almost tender. "Because you are his blood. Because you are ours." A sudden cold pressed against my hand. I looked down, and there, half buried in the roots, was a doll I had never seen before. Unlike the others, it was not broken or weathered. Its face was smooth, painted with gold leaf that had not yet flaked. Its eyes gleamed, and its small mouth curved in something like a smile. I reached for it against my better judgment. The moment my fingers touched its wooden skin, the world shifted. Darkness swallowed the shrine. I was standing in the same place, but everything was wrong. The banyan tree was taller, the shrine whole, the offerings fresh. Figures moved around me, villagers from another time. Women knelt with bowls of rice, men bowed with incense, and children, or rather dolls, lined the steps of the shrine, their painted faces gleaming. I walked among them, unseen, a ghost in a memory. Then I saw her again, my mother, but younger still, carrying me as an infant. She placed me beside the shrine, her face etched with desperation. The monk beside her chanted, sprinkling water across the ground, but his eyes betrayed no holiness. They were dark, fevered, hungry. He lifted a small knife. My mother cried out, clutching me tighter. The vision snapped. I gasped, collapsing onto the roots of the tree. The candle I had lit was gone. The shrine was once again in ruins. But the doll remained in my hand, its smile wider now, almost triumphant. Whispers circled me. She tried to save you. She failed. Now it is your turn. I hurled the doll away, but it landed upright, watching me, its head tilted slightly as if amused. As I stumbled back toward the village, the path seemed longer than before. Shadows stretched across the fields, though the sun still lingered. And everywhere I heard it, the faint patter of small feet, always behind me, never seen. By the time I reached my mother's house, I was shaking. I bolted the door, lit every candle I could find, and sat clutching the photograph of her with the golden doll. Had she offered me once? Had she tried to trade my life for protection, only to stop herself at the last moment? Was that why the spirit clung to me now? The questions gnawed at me, and as the candles burned low, the whispers returned, not outside, inside. They came from the walls, the floor, the ceiling, everywhere. Feed us. Join us. Mother failed. You will not. I covered my ears, but my own blood seemed to hum with their voices. My vision blurred again. This time, the house melted into the shrine beneath the banyan. The dolls surrounded me, their small hands reaching, their mouths whispering endlessly. I screamed. When I came back to myself, the candles were out. The room was dark, and in the center of the floor, the golden doll I had thrown away now sat upright, its head tilted toward me, smiling wider than before. That was when I understood the truth I had been avoiding. The curse was not just on the village, it was on me. And the banyan tree, with its endless whispers, was not a warning. It was a promise. I returned to the temple at dawn when the mist still coiled like a serpent across the fields. The air was heavy, each step crunching against the gravel path leading to the crumbling gates. The temple bells, once bright, now hung silent and rusted, as though they too feared to be heard. Phra Somchai was sweeping the courtyard when I arrived. His back bent with age, his saffron robe faded to dull brown. Yet even in his frailty, there was a stillness about him, as though his body was merely a shell and his spirit carried the weight of centuries. "You have seen them," he said without turning. "Yes," I whispered, "under the banyan tree and in my house. They won't leave me." He stopped sweeping. Slowly he faced me. His eyes were dim, yet piercing, as though they looked not at me, but through me. "They will never leave, not while the bond remains." I followed him inside the main hall. The statues of the Buddha were cracked, their faces worn smooth by years of smoke and incense. Candles burned weakly, their wax pooling like spilled flesh. I told him everything: the visions at the tree, my mother's journal, the doll that would not stay gone. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long time, his hands folded, his lips pressed tight. Finally, he spoke. "Your mother came here many times. She begged me to break the bond, but she could not give up what she had already invited. That is the danger of Kumanthong. Once you open the door, it cannot be closed without cost." I felt my chest tighten. "What cost?" Phra Somchai lowered his gaze. "A life for a life. If you wish to free yourself, the spirit must be given what it was promised, or you must take back what was stolen." I frowned. "I don't understand," he sighed. "These spirits were once children, denied life. They crave it endlessly. Your mother promised them something: protection, devotion, perhaps even you. When she refused, they consumed her instead. Now they turn to you. Unless you fulfill the promise, They will not rest. His words sank like stones in my gut. So, I have to sacrifice someone? The monk shook his head firmly. No, that is the way of darkness. To kill is to fall into their hands. There are other ways, but they are dangerous, and few succeed. What other ways? I pressed. He studied me for a long moment. You must confront them where they were bound. At the banyan tree, you must call them by name one by one and release them. But know this, if even one refuses, the bond will remain, and they will not forgive you. My throat felt dry. And if I fail, his voice dropped to a whisper, then you will not leave that place alive. A silence stretched between us, heavy as the incense smoke curling around the hall. I wanted to argue, to demand another solution, but deep inside I already knew there was none. The monk rose slowly, wincing as his joints cracked. He shuffled to a small cabinet at the back of the hall and returned with a string of black prayer beads. Pressing them into my hand, he said, "Keep these close. They may not stop the spirits, but they will remind you who you are when they try to make you forget." I bowed, clutching the beads tightly. "Thank you." But as I straightened, I saw it, faint, almost hidden in the folds of his robe. Small scratches along his arm, thin parallel lines like those left by a child's nails. Before I could speak, a sound echoed through the hall. Tap, tap, tap. The unmistakable sound of wooden feet on stone. My blood froze. Fra Somchai's expression darkened. "They should not be here," he muttered. He raised a hand, motioning me to stay behind him. The tapping grew louder, closer, until it echoed all around us. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and thin, like small figures gathering just beyond the candlelight. Then came the laughter, high-pitched, layered, coming from every corner at once. The monk began to chant, his voice steady though his hands trembled. The shadows wavered, the laughter faltered, but only for a moment. Then the candles blew out, plunging the hall into darkness. I could not see, but I could feel them. Small hands tugging at my clothes, cold fingers brushing my skin. I stumbled back, clutching the prayer beads. A voice rose above the others, clearer, sharper. "He is ours!" The monk's chanting grew louder, desperate. Suddenly a bell rang, though no one had touched it. Its toll reverberated through the hall like thunder. The shadows shrieked. The small hands vanished. When the candles flared back to life, the hall was empty. Only Fra Somchai and I remained, both of us trembling. The monk sank to his knees, sweat pouring down his face. "They grow stronger," he whispered. "Stronger than I feared. Even the temple cannot keep them out." I knelt beside him. "Then what do I do?" He gripped my arm with surprising strength. His eyes burned with urgency. "You must end this, soon, before they consume you as they did your mother. Go to the banyan tree. Call them. Release them. And if you cannot—" He trailed off, his grip tightening. "Then run far, and never return. For once they claim you, there will be nothing left to save." That night, back in my mother's house, I could not sleep. The monk's warning rang in my ears. A life for a life. Release them, or be consumed. I stared at the photograph of my mother with the golden doll, at her weary smile, at the shadow in her eyes. She had tried and failed. Now it was my turn. The prayer beads felt heavy in my hand, as though they already carried the weight of what awaited me. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the shutters, and in that wind, I heard it again. Children's voices, whispering, laughing, calling my name. They were no longer content to wait, and I knew with a chill that seeped into my bones that the banyan tree was calling me back. The village grew restless as twilight fell. From my window, I could see lanterns being lit one by one, their glow flickering like watchful eyes along the dirt paths. The air smelled of incense, smoke, and something else. raw meat, freshly cut, carried in woven baskets toward the central square. I had heard whispers about the Night of Offerings, a ritual performed only once a year. My mother's journal mentioned it, though always in broken phrases, as if she had been afraid to write the full truth. Now standing on the threshold of her house, I realized I was about to witness what she had once feared most. At the sound of a gong, the villagers emerged from their homes. Men, women, even children, all carried something in their arms. Some held bowls of rice and fruit, others brought pieces of chicken, fish, or pork. But a few carried jars filled with dark liquid I dared not identify, and each of them, without exception, held a doll. The dolls varied. Some were carved from wood, some molded from clay, others dressed in silk or cheap cotton. Some looked ancient, their faces cracked and faded, while others gleamed with fresh paint as if recently made. But all shared the same eerie quality. Their eyes, painted or glass, seemed alive, watching, following. I blended into the crowd, keeping my head low. No one questioned my presence. Perhaps they thought I too had brought an offering. At the center of the square stood an altar beneath a great banyan tree, the same tree where I had first seen the shadows. Its roots spread like veins across the earth, twisting and writhing as though hungry. Candles ringed the trunk, their flames trembling in the windless night. Phra Chai was not there. Instead, a younger monk led the ritual, his shaved head gleaming under the lantern light. His eyes were sharp, unblinking, and his robe hung perfectly straight, as though untouched by gravity. The villagers knelt before the altar, placing their dolls carefully in rows. Food was set before them like a feast for unseen guests. The monk began to chant, his voice low, rhythmic, carrying a cadence that seeped into my bones. As the chanting rose, the atmosphere shifted. The night grew heavier, the air thick, pressing against my lungs. The flames of the candles elongated, bending toward the dolls as though drawn to them. Then it began. The dolls moved. Not much, not like living children, but enough. A head tilted here, an arm twitched there, a wooden jaw cracked open. The villagers didn't flinch. In fact, they smiled, bowing lower, whispering words of devotion. One woman, seated near me, lifted her doll and cradled it against her chest. Her lips brushed its ear as she murmured, "Take what you need, my little one. Protect us." I felt bile rise in my throat. The monk's voice grew louder, the rhythm faster. The villagers swayed in unison, chanting after him, their words blending into a single tide of sound. Kumanthong, Kumanthong. The dolls twitched more violently. Their eyes glistened in the lantern light. And then, to my horror, I saw it. Thin trails of smoke rising from the bowls of food, pulled into the dolls' mouths as though they were feeding. The offerings disappeared, not eaten in the human sense, but drained, their essence consumed. Fruit shriveled, meat blackened, rice turned to dust. And the dolls looked brighter, their colors sharper, their eyes more alive. I thought it was over when the last grain of rice had turned to ash. But then the monk raised a hand, and the villagers responded. A man stepped forward, carrying a rooster bound at the legs. Its wings flapped wildly, eyes wide with terror. Without a word, the monk drew a small blade and slit his throat. Blood poured into a bowl before the dolls. The children of the village clapped. The dolls trembled with hunger. The smoke rose again, this time red, drawn from the bowl into the dolls' waiting mouths. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet were rooted to the earth, my body frozen in the weight of what I was seeing. Then something worse happened. A child, not a doll, but a living boy of perhaps 6, was led forward by his parents. His eyes were blank, as if he were sleepwalking. His parents knelt before the altar, pushing him toward the dolls. The monk placed a hand on the child's head and began chanting again. The dolls stirred violently now, their mouths opening wider, eyes glowing faintly. The boy swayed, his body trembling. I swear I saw his breath leave him, not as vapor, but as a thin silver mist pulled from his lips toward the dolls. The parents did not cry. They smiled. I could no longer breathe. At the edge of the square, an old man whispered to his wife, "It is only a part of him. He will live. The children always live." But I saw the boy collapse, his face pale, his chest heaving weakly. His mother scooped him into her arms, kissing his forehead with pride, as though he had done something noble. The dolls glowed brighter than ever, their forms sharper, more defined. For a moment they looked less like dolls and more like children, real children, standing in rows, their eyes gleaming with something between hunger and gratitude. The monk's voice cut through the air. "They are pleased." The villagers cheered softly, bowing until their foreheads touched the dirt. I could not take it anymore. My vision blurred, my hands shook, my heart hammered against my ribs. I stumbled back, away from the crowd, from the dolls, from the altar. But as I moved, I felt dozens of eyes snap toward me. Not the villagers, but the dolls. They were watching me, every single one. The chanting faltered for the briefest moment. The monk's gaze locked onto mine. His lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. "You," he said, his voice cutting through the night. "You carry the bond." The crowd turned to me, murmurs rippling like waves. I ran. I don't remember how I made it back to my mother's house, only that the path seemed longer than before, the shadows deeper, the wind colder. My legs carried me without thought, driven by pure terror. When I finally slammed the door shut behind me, I collapsed to the floor, gasping. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the prayer beads. But even inside, even alone, I could still feel them. The eyes of the dolls, watching from the darkness, their hunger not yet sated. The night of offerings was not just a ritual. It was a pact that bound the entire village. And now I feared it bound me too. The morning after the ritual, the village felt different, too quiet, as if the whole place was holding its breath. I woke to the sound of crows on the roof, their cries harsh, echoing like a warning. My body ached as though I had run miles, though I had only stumbled home the night before. I tried to forget what I had seen, the dolls feeding, the boy collapsing, the monk's smile, but the images clung to me, sharper than any nightmare. Worse was the memory of the doll's eyes, all turning toward me at once, recognizing me. I knew then I couldn't run from this. Not anymore. I began searching my mother's house again, this time with desperate determination. I tore through drawers, lifted floorboards, pulled books from the shelves. Dust coated my hands, my throat burned, but I kept going. It was in the wardrobe that I found it, a wooden box, small and lacquered, hidden beneath folded blankets. The lock was rusted, but it broke easily under my weight. Inside lay bundles of old letters tied with faded ribbon, strands of hair coiled like keepsakes, and a thin, leather-bound book. My mother's handwriting filled its pages, a second journal, one she had never meant me to find. Her words trembled across the pages, uneven, hurried, as though written in fear. "The monk says it is dangerous, but I cannot stop. The child is gone, but his spirit can remain. If I feed him, if I care for him, he will bless us. He will watch over my son." I froze, the words blurred. His spirit, my son. I read on, my hands shaking. I promised him, if he stayed, if he brought luck, then one day I would give him a body. I would give him life again. When my son is grown, he will understand. He will carry the bond. The page ended in a blot of ink, as if she had dropped the pen mid-sentence. My heart turned to ice. My mother hadn't bound herself to the Kumanthong for her own sake. She had bound me. I stumbled back, the journal clattering to the floor. My breath came fast, shallow. All the pieces fell into place. Her tired eyes, her constant offerings, her secrecy. She hadn't been protecting herself. She had been preparing me. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the window. I looked out and saw them, the village children, running along the path. But their shadows stretched too far, bending at odd angles, and for a split second, I swore their faces weren't their own. I slammed the shutters closed. That night, I dreamed of my mother. She stood by the banyan tree, her white dress fluttering in the wind. She looked younger, almost as I remembered from my childhood. "My son," she said softly, "you came back. Why?" My voice cracked. "Why did you do it?" Tears shimmered in her eyes. "Because I couldn't lose you too." Her hands trembled as she reached out. "I gave them a promise, a body for a spirit. They kept you safe all these years. Now they want what was agreed." I shook my head violently. "No, you didn't have to." Her smile was pained, almost broken. "I did. You don't know what it means to bury one child. I would not bury two." Before I could answer, the ground beneath her split, and small hands reached up, clutching her dress, pulling her down. She did not scream. She only looked at me, lips forming silent words. "Forgive me." I woke drenched in sweat, the prayer beads tangled around my neck. The next day I went to the temple, carrying the second journal. I found Phra Somchai in the courtyard, though he looked weaker than before, his skin pale, his eyes sunken. I showed him the pages. His hands shook as he read, his mouth tightening. "It is worse than I feared," he said at last. "What does it mean?" I demanded. He closed the book gently, almost with reverence. "Your mother made a pact not for herself, but for you. She promised to give them a vessel. And you are that vessel." The ground seemed to tilt beneath me. "No," I whispered. "There has to be another way." "There may be," the monk said slowly, "but it will not be easy. You must break the promise where it was made. At the banyan tree, before the night of the next moon. And if I don't," his eyes burned into mine, "then they will take what they are owed, with or without your consent." That night I couldn't bear to stay in the house. I walked the edge of the village, where the rice fields swayed under the moonlight. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of damp earth and incense. I stopped when I heard it, the creak of wooden sandals on the dirt road. Tap, tap, tap. I turned. A small figure stood in the path. A boy, no older than 10, dressed in rags. His eyes glowed faintly, his skin pale as wax. In his hand, he held a golden doll. When he spoke, his voice was clear, unchildlike. "She kept her promise. Now you must keep yours." I staggered back, my mouth dry. "What do you want from me?" The boy smiled. His teeth were too sharp. "Life." Then he was gone, dissolving into mist that drifted toward the banyan tree. I ran home, slamming the door shut, clutching the prayer beads like a lifeline. The second journal still lay on the table, its pages whispering my fate. My mother's words echoed in my skull. "I promised him, when my son is grown, he will understand." But I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. Yet deep inside, beneath the terror, I knew the truth. The promise would not vanish. It lived in me, in my blood, in the bond my mother had forged long before I could choose. And now the spirits were waiting, waiting for me to decide whether I would resist or surrender. The days that followed blurred into a haze of dread. The village was no longer the same, or perhaps it had always been this way, and only now did my eyes begin to open. At first it was subtle. The villagers walked with a strange stillness, their eyes glassy, their voices hushed. Children no longer laughed freely. When they smiled, their mouths seemed too wide, their teeth too sharp in the lamplight. At night, lights flickered behind closed doors, shadows dancing on the walls as if whole families bowed to unseen guests. Then it grew worse. I saw dolls carried everywhere, tied to backs, tucked into baskets, cradled like infants. Not a single villager went without one, and each doll seemed more alive. I caught them blinking, saw their tiny wooden chests rise and fall as if they were breathing. And once, as I passed a woman in the street, I swear I heard her doll whisper. I tried to keep my head low, but the village was watching me, always. The children followed me with their eyes, their dolls pressed to their chests. Old men paused their conversations when I walked by. Women lowered their voices, but I could feel their words crawling on my skin like insects. You carry the bond. He will be the vessel. The promise will be fulfilled. No one spoke to me directly, yet no one stopped me either. It was as if I were already chosen, already belonging to them. I returned often to the banyan tree, though each visit left me shaken. The roots seemed to shift when I approached, curling closer, their surfaces slick with something darker than sap. Offerings lay scattered around the base, bowls of fruit, scraps of meat, strands of hair, some fresh, some rotting. The air buzzed with flies, and always the laughter, high, childlike, carried on the wind even when the air was still. One evening, I saw them clearly, silhouettes of children sitting among the branches. Their legs dangled, their heads tilted, their eyes glowing faintly. When I blinked, they were gone, but the sound of wooden sandals followed me all the way back to the house. Inside, the walls of my mother's house seemed to close in on me. The prayer beads still hung around my neck, but they felt lighter now, as if their protection was fading. I read and reread her second journal, searching for answers, but all I found were fragments of guilt and desperation. If he refuses them, they will take him by force. Better he gives himself than they tear him apart. Phra Somchai warned me. He said this path leads only to ruin. But what choice do I have? I will not bury another child. The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. My mother had given me life, but also shackled me to death. That night I heard footsteps outside, not hurried, not clumsy, but measured, deliberate. I peered through the shutters and saw a procession, dozens of villagers moving silently down the road. Each carried a lantern, each carried a doll. They walked toward the banyan tree. Drawn by a force I could not resist, I followed at a distance. The moon was thin, a pale sickle, barely enough to light the way. Yet their lanterns glowed brightly, casting long, stretching shadows that seemed alive. When they reached the tree, they formed a circle, kneeling in unison. The dolls were set before them, rows upon rows of glassy eyes gleaming in the dark. The monk from the Night of Offerings stood at the center. His chant began low, but it grew, vibrating through the earth, echoing in my bones. The villagers joined, their voices weaving together until it was impossible to tell them apart. And then the dolls answered. Their mouths opened, and from them came a sound not made for human throats. A chorus of wails and giggles, moans and whispers, all layered into a single inhuman voice. The banyan tree shuddered. Its branches creaked as though in pain or in hunger. The ground at its roots split open, revealing darkness beneath, deep and endless. From that darkness, shadows began to rise. They were children, yet not. Some crawled, some limped, some floated just above the earth. Their faces were pale, their eyes glowing faintly, their mouths smeared with something dark. They gathered around the dolls, touching them, merging with them, as though flesh and wood were one. The villagers did not flee. They welcomed them. They reached out, letting small, ghostly hands cling to their arms, their faces, their hearts. And I realized with sickening clarity, the villagers were not just caretakers. They were hosts. They carried these spirits within them, sharing their lives, their bodies. No wonder they looked at me differently. I was not one of them. I was something more. The monk's voice cut through the air. The promise nears its end. The vessel stands among us. Soon he will give what was promised. Soon the bond will be complete. The villagers turned as one, their eyes in the eyes of their dolls, locked onto me where I stood hidden at the edge of the clearing. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The monk smiled. Do not run, child. This is your fate. Your mother gave you to us long ago. I ran anyway. Branches clawed at my face. Roots snagged my feet. But I did not stop. The shadows followed, their laughter echoing closer, closer, until I collapsed inside my mother's house, slamming the door shut, trembling. The house felt colder than ever, the silence suffocating. Yet I was not alone. From the corner of the room, a voice whispered, "She promised us." I spun. A doll sat on the table, one I had never seen before. Its face was painted gold, its eyes black and endless. I hadn't brought it inside. Slowly, its wooden head turned toward me. "She promised you." My legs gave way, and I fell to my knees, the prayer beads slipping from my grasp. The doll smiled, and in that smile I saw the truth. The shadows were not just gathering. They were waiting, waiting for me to give in, to fulfill the promise sealed before my birth. And the night of the next moon was coming soon. I did not sleep. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant seeing them. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at the golden doll on the table. Its painted lips curved upward in that mocking smile, its eyes pools of tar that reflected nothing. I had thrown it outside the night before, and yet, when I returned from bolting the door, it was back, seated neatly where it had been. I tried burning it. The fire sputtered, smoke filled the house, but when the flames died, the doll remained, untouched, pristine. It was not wood. It was not clay. It was something else, something that refused to die, and it whispered to me, without moving its lips, "You are ours. She gave you to us. Do not fight." By morning, my sanity frayed. The villagers walked as they always did, but now their silence was unbearable. I saw them tilt their heads in perfect unison when I passed. Their dolls turned too, as if every gaze drilled into me. I went to the river, desperate for solitude, but even there the air was wrong. The water rippled without wind. I knelt to drink, and in the reflection, I did not see myself. I saw a child, pale, thin, with blackened eyes, its mouth stretched wide in a grin. When I touched the surface, the reflection did not vanish. Instead, the child raised its hand, mirroring me, and pressed its palm against mine from beneath the water. The river turned red. I stumbled back, choking on bile, and the villagers on the bank simply watched. None moved to help. None even blinked. I returned to the house, clawing through my mother's belongings. There had to be more. Another journal, a letter, a note, something, and I found it, hidden beneath the floorboards. A third book. Smaller than the others, its pages brittle with age. Inside were prayers, not to Buddha, not to any god I knew. These were invocations, pleas to spirits, bargains written in her shaking hand. One page was torn, but what remained froze me. When the moon turns black, he must be delivered, the child of my blood, the vessel. Only then will the pact be sealed and the curse lifted from the mothers of this village. If I fail, they will come for him themselves. So it was true. I was never meant to live free. My entire existence had been payment. That night the scratching began. At first I thought it was rats, tiny claws at the walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. But the sound grew louder, closer, until I heard fingernails scraping across the wood, dragging slowly, purposefully. I pressed my ear to the wall. A voice hissed from the other side. "Let us in!" The boards bowed inward, as if something pressed against them from the outside. Tiny fingers poked through the cracks, bloody and restless. The smell of rot filled the room. I clutched the prayer beads, muttering chants I barely remembered. For a moment, the scratching stopped, but then laughter erupted from the ceiling, the floor, the door, everywhere at once, and the golden doll tilted its head as if amused. I broke then. Something inside me snapped like a brittle twig. I grabbed the doll and hurled it into the river. This time I did not look back. I ran deeper into the forest, lungs burning, legs trembling. I did not care where I went, only that it was far from the house, far from the whispers, far from the eyes. The forest, however, was no refuge. The banyan tree loomed before me, vast and impossible, as though it had grown larger overnight. Its roots stretched across the ground like veins, its branches swallowing the moonlight. At its base, villagers knelt again. Not dozens this time. Hundreds. Every man, woman, and child in the village gathered, their faces slack with devotion, their dolls lined in endless rows. The monk stood above them, robes stained dark, his eyes glowing faintly. And when he saw me, his smile spread too wide for a human mouth. "You cannot flee, child," he said, his voice echoing like thunder. "The pact binds you. Even should you die, you will return to us. You are the vessel you always were." The villagers echoed, chanting in unison, "The vessel, the vessel, the vessel." The banyan tree groaned, splitting open at its trunk. From within, shadows spilled like smoke, coiling upward, taking shape. Children again, hundreds of them, their eyes hollow, their laughter piercing. They reached for me with hands too small, too cold. I turned to run, but the forest paths twisted. No matter which direction I took, I circled back to the tree. The air thickened, my breath ragged, my vision blurring. And then, at the edge of the clearing, I saw her. My mother. She stood beneath the branches, pale and trembling. Her hair hung loose, her eyes sunken, but I knew her face. She looked at me with sorrow, and for a moment I thought she might save me. But then she shook her head. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It is the only way. They will not stop until you give yourself. I did what I had to keep you alive this long." Her voice cracked, but she did not move toward me. She only lowered her gaze. The children swarmed her, wrapping around her legs, climbing her shoulders. She did not resist. She did not scream. She simply let them take her, her body dissolving into shadow. And she was gone. The world tilted. I fell to my knees, clawing at the earth. I had nothing left. No mother, no escape, no sanity. The monk's chant filled the air again, and the villagers bowed low, their foreheads pressed to the ground. The dolls' mouths opened wide, exhaling a chorus of cries. The banyan tree cracked open wider, its heart pulsing like flesh, its sap dripping red. And within that wound of wood, I saw a shape waiting, small, fragile, familiar. It was me, a child version of myself, sitting cross-legged in the hollow of the tree, smiling with black eyes. The truth hit me like a blade. I was not running from the spirits. I was running toward them. I had been theirs from the beginning. The shadows closed in, and somewhere deep inside, a voice that was not mine whispered, "Stop fighting. Come home." The chanting never stopped. It drummed against my skull, deep and rhythmic, like a heartbeat that was not my own. The banyan tree gaped wide before me, its hollow glistening like a wound. And within it, the child that looked like me waited. Its smile grew sharper the longer I stared. I wanted to run, but my body betrayed me. My legs moved without command, dragging me forward across the roots. The earth pulsed beneath my bare feet. warm and wet, as though I walked on flesh. The villagers bowed lower. Some whispered my name. Others called me Vessel, again and again, their voices layering until it became a single unbroken drone. The monk raised his arms. His eyes glowed with a sickly amber light. "It is time," he said. His voice rolled through the clearing, yet it felt as if he spoke inside my chest. "The pact must be sealed. Through him they will be fed. Through him we will endure." The dolls began to move. At first, just a twitch, a shiver of their tiny wooden hands. Then their heads turned in unison, their eyes gleaming under the moonlight. One by one, they crawled forward, dragging their stiff limbs across the dirt, gathering at the base of the tree like an army of the dead. I gagged on the stench of incense and decay. The child in the tree tilted its head. I mirrored it unwillingly, my muscles locked into its rhythm, my breath sinking with its shallow gasps. I screamed, but the sound that came from my throat was not mine. It was shrill, high-pitched, like the cry of a newborn. The villagers cheered. The monk began his incantation, his voice rising and falling like waves. The words were not Thai, not any language I had heard before. They were older, guttural, vibrating in the bones. Every syllable scraped against my ears, peeling sanity away like flesh from bone. The air thickened. I could see my breath, white and trembling, though the night was warm. Shadows bled from the dolls, slithering across the ground, wrapping around my ankles. I fought to move, but the shadows tightened like ropes, binding me. My chest heaved. My heart hammered. The banyan tree pulsed, sap dripping red, each drop landing with a hiss. The roots shifted, curling upward, wrapping around my arms, my legs. They pulled me closer to the hollow. The child inside laughed soundlessly. And then I saw her, my mother again. Not as she was in life, but younger, beautiful, dressed in white, her hair combed smooth, her eyes wet with sorrow. She stepped out from the line of shadows, trembling. "My son," she whispered, "I never wanted this. I prayed every night that it would not come to pass. But the curse cannot be broken. It can only be fed." Her hand reached for me, but before it touched, the child in the hollow hissed. My body convulsed, my mouth opening wide, and a voice not mine spilled out. "Liar! She gave you willingly. She placed you in our hands before you could walk. She is the reason you are ours." I shook my head violently, sobbing. "No, that's not true." But she lowered her gaze, and I knew. I knew it was. The monk struck a gong. The sound reverberated like thunder, shattering the night. The dolls shrieked in unison, their tiny jaws opening wider than they should. From their mouths spilled smoke, thick and black, filling the air with screams of children long buried. The smoke swirled toward me, into me. It clawed down my throat, filling my lungs, searing my chest. I convulsed, choking, clawing at my skin as if I could tear it out. And then the world fell silent. I was no longer in the forest. I stood in a corridor, endless, walls damp and cracked, lined with doors. Each door bore a name I did not recognize. Whispers seeped through the wood, laughter, sobbing, pleading. I walked barefoot on the cold floor until I found a door with my name. My hand trembled as I touched the knob. It was warm, pulsing, alive. When I opened it, I was a child again, sitting in the hollow of the banyan tree, the same child I had seen outside. He smiled at me, eyes black, teeth sharp. "You are late," he said, though his lips barely moved. "We've been waiting." Behind him, dozens of other children emerged from the shadows, their bodies twisted, limbs bent wrong, but their faces carried the same smile. They reached for me. Their touch was ice. I screamed, stumbling backward, but the child lunged, pressing his forehead to mine. My vision split. My body convulsed. I saw flashes, villagers tearing open graves, placing stillborn infants into jars of oil. My mother kneeling before the monk, tears streaking her face as she offered a bundle wrapped in cloth. Me, nights of chanting, nights of feeding, nights of dolls whispering, my face reflected in every single one of them. I tried to push him away, but he sank into me, melting like smoke, filling every hollow of my being. And I realized I was not the vessel. I was the feast. I woke back in the clearing, gasping. My body was bound to the tree by its roots. The monk towered over me, chanting still. The villagers swayed. Their eyes were rolled back, whites gleaming in the moonlight. The dolls clung to them, biting their skin, feeding. None cried out. None resisted. The child's laughter echoed in my head, spilling from my mouth without consent. My hands clawed at the roots, not to escape, but to hold them tighter. Because part of me wanted it. Part of me craved the end of the struggle, to give in, to let the darkness take me. My mother's voice broke through the noise, faint, desperate. Fight, my son. Please, fight them. You are stronger than me, stronger than them. But the monk drowned her out, his voice booming. Accept your place. Become the bridge. Become the vessel. The banyan tree groaned, splitting further. From its hollow poured rivers of shadow, flooding into my chest. My bones cracked. My skin burned. My vision blurred white. And then, I was no longer certain if I was still me. The world was red. Not the soft red of sunset, but the thick, suffocating crimson of blood seen through closed eyelids. I felt it pulse inside me, each beat of the banyan tree echoing through my chest. My veins burned. My bones creaked. My mouth whispered chants I did not know, words that were not mine. The monk's voice thundered, guiding me toward completion. The villagers bowed lower, their foreheads pressed so hard against the dirt I thought their skulls would crack. The dolls clung to them, feeding, their little mouths wet with whispers. And I was the center, the offering, the bridge. But somewhere beneath the noise, buried deep, I still heard her voice. My mother. Fight. I forced my head upward. The child within me laughed, twisting my face into his. I saw through his eyes now, saw the villagers not as people, but as flames of life, burning bright, delicious. My mouth watered with hunger. They are yours, he hissed. Take them. Feed. We will be strong together. For a heartbeat, I wanted to. The hunger clawed at me, a bottomless pit begging to be filled. But then I remembered the river, the reflection that wasn't mine, the tiny hand pressing against my palm from below the water. That child had never been me. It had been them, always them, and I would not let them win. I screamed, not the shrill cry of the child, but my own voice, raw, broken, defiant. The roots tightened, cutting into my skin, but I twisted until blood flowed. The shadows clawed at my chest, but I shoved back, my body convulsing as I tore against something larger than myself. The monk roared. His chant faltered. For the first time, his composure cracked. Hold him, he commanded. The villagers lurched forward, dozens of hands grabbing me, nails digging into my flesh. Their dolls clung to me, biting, hissing. The child laughed harder inside my skull. Fool, you cannot resist us. You are already ours. But my mother's voice cut through again. Louder now, stronger than before. If you cannot live free, then die free. Break the chain. End the curse. I understood then. The pact required a vessel, a living vessel. If I died, if I destroyed the body they craved, the chain would shatter. The hunger would starve. They would never release me willingly. But I could deny them their feast. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted iron. My blood spilled across my lips, down my chin. The doll shrieked at the scent. The shadows recoiled, writhing. The child's voice cracked with fury. "No, you cannot! We own you!" But I spat blood into the roots, into the hollow of the tree, staining it red. And the tree shuddered. The ground split open. Roots tore upward, thrashing like serpents. The villagers screamed, their bodies tossed aside like rag dolls. The monk staggered, his staff breaking in half, his glow dimming. The banyan tree bled. Thick rivers of sap spilled out, smelling of rot and death. The dolls shriveled, their painted faces cracking, collapsing into piles of ash. Inside me, the child clawed and screamed, shredding at my mind. Images tore across my vision. Burning infants, mothers weeping, jars of oil, endless rituals. Centuries of suffering, feeding, repeating. All of it demanded to continue. But I held on. I dragged the shadows down with me, into the pit opening beneath the roots. If I could not survive, neither would they. The monk lunged, his hands wrapping around my throat. His eyes burned with desperation. "You cannot undo this. Without the pact, the village will perish. We will all perish," I gasped, vision fading, but I forced a smile through bloodied lips. "Then maybe it's time." I pulled the beads from my wrist, my mother's last gift, and jammed them into my mouth, crushing them with my teeth until shards pierced my tongue. I let the blood flow freely, pouring down into the roots, feeding the tree poison instead of flesh. The child howled, the shadows convulsed, and then silence. The banyan tree collapsed in on itself, its hollow imploding with a deafening crack. The monk was swallowed whole, his scream cut short. The villagers scattered, their trance breaking, their cries human again for the first time in years. The roots released me. My body dropped to the ground, broken, trembling. I could not move. My chest rose once, twice, then faltered. Above me, the night sky opened, clear, endless, stars shining like they had been hidden all this time. And I saw her, my mother, not as a ghost, not as a vision, but standing in the starlight, smiling softly. "You're free," she whispered. "Rest now." I closed my eyes. But just before the dark took me, I heard something else. A faint giggle, high-pitched, playful. I opened my eyes weakly, turning my head. And there, half buried in the dirt, was the golden doll. Its lips curved in a smile. Its eyes gleamed faintly. Still untouched, still waiting. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.